Welcome everyone to another Max Chat. This is episode 2, and I'm glad to have Dariush Alavi. Alavi?
Yes, rhymes with allergy. Alavi.
Alavi, okay. And he is a creator of Persolaise, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a great YouTube channel that I've come to watch it over and over again. I'm very fond of. And he's also a book writer. He wrote this beautiful book that if you guys are looking to a great fragrance reading, perfume reading, this is definitely a great way to do it. And I wanted to welcome Mr. Alavi here into the Max Chat and say hello to the fragrance world and let us know exactly what Persolaise is all about.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very, very kind. I didn't realize I had so many names and so many different identities. But you can call me what you like, but not Mr. Alavi. It's fine. Darius is fine. Persolaise is fine.
Well, that's great. So, tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel. How long have you had the channel? And do you normally do lives? Do you go live every day?
I most certainly do not go live every day. No, because there are too many other things that I need to juggle in my life to allow me to do it every day. How old the YouTube channel is actually a good question. I would have to look it up because I think about my perfume work in terms of when the blog started, with the Persolaise.com blog. And that was 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago. It was in March 2010 that the Persolaise blog started. And I guess it was maybe about 3 years ago that I thought it might be fun to try something different, to try something new. And as I'm sure, people tell you lots and lots of different things. They say, oh, you must start doing Instagram Live. You must start podcast. You must start this. And a few people said, you need to try YouTube. And my initial reaction was an absolute and definite no. Because the idea of setting up cameras and lights and mics and things like that, where I might have to then look at footage of myself and edit it and listen to the sound of my own voice, it was just an absolute nightmare. I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to cope with that. But then I thought, what if I did it live, so that whatever happens in the live session is what goes out. I don't need to worry about editing. I don't need to worry about whether I make a little mistake or I have a little blooper, essentially, because it's okay, because it's live and people expect that kind of thing live. And I gradually came around to the idea. And so, yes, pretty much all of the content now is live. I have this series which I've called Love at First Scent. Sometimes I look at one perfume. Sometimes I look at several in one go. I've started doing some interviews, but it's definitely not daily. At the most, it might be once a week and sometimes even less frequent than that.
But you normally started as a blogger then. The blogger is how you got started into the fragrance world, correct?
Absolutely. I was Persolaise.com, the blog, which was in March 2010.
Wow, incredible. So 10 years in the making. Now, when it comes to your book, which, by the way, I absolutely love. I think it's great, fun reading. If you guys, again, are looking into dabbing into the fragrance world, this is Les Snob. I want you to tell me a little bit about how you came about to writing this book. And is this Les Snob, is this something that's from England? Is this something that's common? Because I realize they have a whole bunch of different series in this collection, a book on cigars, a book on whiskey, a Taylor book. So how did you come about this project? Could you share this with us?
You're absolutely right. It is a series. It was one of those situations. And by the way, I did not write any of the other books in the series, as anybody will know if they look them up. No, but yes, you're right. I believe there's one on coffee. There's one on cigars. There's, I think, one on wine. The whole idea was luxury items, luxury goods. And it was one of those stories where the book actually found me. I had been doing Persolaise writing, the Persolaise blog, for about a couple of years, I believe. And by this point, I'd had a few articles published on Base Notes. I'm sure every single one of your viewers, will know what Base Notes is. And it was one of those situations where somebody that I know from the perfume community, if I can call it that, in London, in the UK, was approached by somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and they were looking for somebody to write the perfume edition, the perfume book for their Le Snob series. And they approached me. It really was as simple as that. I jumped at the chance, understandably. We had to set out a few parameters. There are certain things about the structure of the Le Snob books that are common to all of the books. So it was a given from the word go that, you know, there would have to be such and such an introduction, and then a chapter on this and a chapter on that. And I was pretty much told that I would have to have, you know, a section on mainstream perfumes, a section on niche perfumes, maybe broken down by mainstream feminine, mainstream masculine, etc., etc., etc. So in a sense, that made the writing of it a little bit easier because that structure was in place. And I needed it to be as easy as possible because I did not actually have a huge amount of time to write the book. Don't even ask me how much time I had to write the book, because I will not tell you. It was like an embarrassingly brief amount of time. But I did it. And in a way, it was great, actually, that I had to write it in this huge burst, this outpouring of creativity, because I didn't have time, literally, I didn't have time to overthink it. And overthinking is one of my biggest faults. You know, sometimes it's a strength, but sometimes it is a fault as well. And so the book had to be written. I think I ended up having just over 100 perfumes in it. And yes, it came out a while ago. It was always going to be a limited run. The Le Snob books were never designed or printed with the intention of them being reprinted. So once they were sold, that's it. So if anybody would like to try and get a copy, you would need to look at sort of, you know, third-party resellers online, because you probably won't find it in a bookshop anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, but there are copies around. I mean, obviously, you know, you got a copy, and there are still copies.
I wanted to let people know about that because it's not readily available. Like he said, I believe it was released in 2012, so very limited run. It's almost like a collector's item at this point. I had a little of a hard time trying to find one. I was able to locate one, which again was shipped from the UK. It took about 3 weeks to arrive, but I'm glad I picked it up. It is amazing, very concise, not just because he's here. You guys know I mean what I say. Very good reading, very well written. He's, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, Darius is very well versed. In fact, I had invited him to be here at Scent Explore, which none of you will know. This is going to be public now. Once I, you know, obviously produced this video, he was going to be one of the people that were going to be featured in the panel. And we're definitely going to be talking to having him join us for this year or next year in case this year doesn't happen. So I am a big fan of him, and I'm glad that he's here on this episode too. I'm happy to share his book and his work. Now, continuing this,
you have to let me say thank you, man. You said that's very, very kind. I'm very, very grateful for that. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. So, you know, when it comes to, so you started the blog, you wrote the book. Are there any other books that you have written? Are there any projects perhaps that you may do in the future with book writing, or even fragrance producing or creative directing? Do you have any kind of, you know, foreseeable future involvement in any of those facets?
Well, I mean, I don't mind sharing this with you. I haven't actually said this, I don't think, in any other public forum. No, there is nothing in the pipeline as far as perfume work is concerned. So there's definitely no revelation coming up anytime soon about, you know, Persolaise, the creative director, or there's certainly no other perfume book in the pipeline, or a non-fiction perfume book. But the one overriding passion that I've had in my life, or interest, actually, no, compulsion is the word. Compulsion is the word, because it is a rod for my own back as much as anything else, is that for as long as I can remember, I have actually written fiction. And in a way, it was, Persolaise was born out of that. Persolaise was actually born out of research that I was carrying out for a fiction project, which never led to anything. So the only thing that I am putting a lot of energy into at the moment is trying to find representation for a novel that I've written. I am currently in the process of sending it out to agents, and you know, that's been many years worth of work, putting the novel together. It very much encompasses the world of perfume in some ways, but it isn't a perfume book. it's a story that sort of links the world of perfume with a world that you wouldn't necessarily associate with perfume. But other than that, no, there is nothing else in the pipeline.
Good to know, but I'm sure there will be. If you were involved in other book projects besides fragrance or novels, is there a particular way that you would like to be perceived? Like, how would you describe your writing on this book? Even though it was very fast writing of this book, how would you describe, as far as, if you had people would be interested in purchasing this book, how would you summarize the book as? Very informative, very detail oriented? Because I know it's broken down into different chapters, which is extremely easy reading for me, very concise.
How would I describe the book? The whole Snob series, first of all, are designed to be super portable. So the whole idea is that it looks and feels a little bit like a moleskin notebook, with the rubber band. So the idea is that you're meant to be able to take it out with you when you go shopping. You're meant to be able to pop it into your bag or your rucksack or whatever. So it's not supposed to be a great big coffee table tome, a heavily illustrated volume. And it is meant to be absolutely an introduction to whatever field it is that the book is about. So, introduction to cigars, introduction to wine. So it is very much an introduction to perfume. But I suppose it also just takes you a few steps beyond the most basic introduction. So it is very much written for the person who might like to end up having a fair amount of expert knowledge. So it's not necessarily just the casual shopper. Okay, so not somebody who goes into, I don't know, an airport duty free and just thinks, I just want to pick something up that will make me smell nice. It's for somebody who may actually want to know a little bit about the people who create these perfumes, the perfumers, the notes that go into them, how it all works, the histories behind some of the brands, but all done in an extremely concise, succinct, and accessible way. And as I said, I think it features over 100 perfumes, but each perfume is just dealt with individually, and the write-up, the blurb on each perfume is only in the region of, I think, about 100 words, 120 words or so per perfume. So there are these little nugget-sized chunks of information that you pick up about the perfume, with a little bit thrown in there, about who made it, and then some kind of, semi-poetic description from me about what the actual perfume smells like. So the whole thing is supposed to be very, very accessible, and both fun and serious. There's nothing superficial about the book, but hopefully it's also not too heavy, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. Now, there's no chance of this particular company re-releasing this book, right? Since it was limited run. Do you have any rights to the intellectual property of the book? So if you were inclined to maybe partner with somebody and re-release, because it's a sin that it's as hard to find, because it's such a nice little book. I would love to make it readily available, worldwide. So is this something that could perhaps happen?
Now, it's interesting you say that, because it almost makes me feel like you've done some research, because we haven't talked about this. I don't remember. But no, I do not have rights over the content of the book, because I was hired to do it effectively by a go-between. So there was a publisher, there were the people who published the book, and then there were also the people who commissioned me to write it. They were the kind of middleman, effectively, and they hold the rights. And so, for instance, they decided, in their wisdom, for whatever reason, that there was never going to be an electronic version of the book. There wasn't ever going to be like a Kindle version or that kind of thing, which I also personally think is a real shame. I get that they may have had some kind of an issue with the visuals, because we should also say that the book is very, very beautifully illustrated, and I can say that because I don't have to take credit for it, because they hired an illustrator called Tonwin Jones to do these really, really charming, sweet, colored line drawings that are dotted about through the book. I suppose there would have been an issue around getting that into a Kindle version of the book, but no, I have no rights over it whatsoever. A while back, I approached the publishers and said, look, would you ever be interested in doing another version? Because as far as I'm aware, the book did very well. I wasn't even allowed to really have explicit information about sales.
Wow.
But they basically said that, you know, it was what it was. The Le Snob series is over and done with. They did a German translation as well, by the way, and that is much more easily available. So if anybody, you know, watching and listening out there speaks German, then they might like to try and get that version.
That's my other point too. I don't mean to cut you, but that's my other point too. I believe it's such a great little book that I think it would be great not only to re-release it, but also to do it in different languages, perhaps Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, because it's a great little book. It's a very little, you know, it's a great, because it has so much, you know, crunched together, but it's all very useful information.
You're very, very kind to say that, Max. I appreciate it. And yes, that was the idea. The idea was to pack as much as possible into something that you could consume, if I can put it that way, really quickly and carry around with you. You know, there are lots and lots of perfume books out there that I love. Well, actually, maybe lots and lots is a bit of an exaggeration, because actually one of the problems...
That's my next question, though. I want to know from you, you know, if you've been inspired by other perfume books, or if you would recommend people, hey, you know, these are some of the great books that I've read on perfume, or maybe some recommendations about, you know, other writers that you enjoy in books on perfumes and things like that.
Sure. I suppose there wouldn't be really too many surprises on what I'm about to say. I do have a list of some of the books that I recommend over on Persolaise.com.
Good to know.
I would have to mention a book which actually last year happened to be published by the very same people who published my book, Hardy Grant. This is a book by a dear friend of mine called Neil Chapman, who is also a blogger. He writes as the Black Narcissus. And this is a book called Perfume in Search of Your Signature Scent. Very, very different in style from mine, you know, very different in presentation and everything. His book is much more personal, but at its core, it does still go through perfume by perfume. He has organized the perfume according to notes. Some of the notes are the kind of notes that you might be familiar with. Some are a little bit more idiosyncratic. So I definitely recommend that one. I would definitely recommend a book called Perfume, A Century of Scents by another writer who happens to be a friend called Lizzie Ostrom. Now, that's an interesting book because it's not really the kind of book where you would learn about the production of perfume or the components of perfume, but it looks at perfume as a cultural artifact. So what Lizzie has done in that book is she goes decade by decade, looking at the perfumes which struck a particular chord in society. So, for instance, she looks at Brut and why Brut may have been significant when it was. I would have to say, you know, Luca Turin and Tania Sanchez's book obviously has been influential to anybody who has picked up a pen to try and write anything about perfume. And there seem to be people at the moment who take pleasure in putting down what they've done or denigrating it, which I think is a little bit too simple. I mean, I may not always agree with everything they have to say, but I think their writing is
Their writing is incredible. I agree. I have both of their editions. It's just that sometimes people get a little too sensitive. They think they may be a little bit too critical or too harsh in their descriptions of some fragrances.
But they do it well. I mean, you know, the books that also really fired me up were both of the Chandler Burr books. What were they called? The Emperor of Scent and I think The Perfect Scent. So there are a few out there. There's probably like a really, really obvious one at the moment that I'm forgetting, but some of my favorite ones. If you can also get the English translations of some of the books written by Jean-Claude Ellena, they're really interesting, quite strange, going off on tangents, dreamy, poetic, but well worth reading.
Very deep and poetic, absolutely. So since we talked about perfumers, we talked about books, so let me ask you some nice, fun fragrance questions here. You're a big fan of fragrances, of course. Can you perhaps name one first love, like one fragrance? You talk about, first love, right? You have a series on your channel called Love at First Sniff, correct?
Love at First Scent, yeah.
Okay, so what would you say is a fragrance that had that effect on you? If you go back into your childhood years, you remember that one fragrance that really inspired you at the first sniff. It's like, wow, this is something different.
Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit.
Dior's Fahrenheit. My mum worked for Dior at the time when Fahrenheit came out.
87, 88, right?
Yeah, I'd have to check. That sounds about right because Poison was 85, so that sounds right. She was. We were living in the Middle East at the time, and she was. I'm pretty sure she was invited to the launch of Fahrenheit.
You see this?
Which concert is that? The Esprit de Parfum? I can't see.
No, this is the Eau de Toilette from 1985.
Oh yes, I can see it now.
Gorgeous, gorgeous.
It's just so amazing. That it's such a fantastic scent. And what Dior did at that time, you know, when they had almost right, you know, one after the other. They had Poison, Fahrenheit, Dune. I mean, it was this amazing time where they just released these fantastic things. But Fahrenheit, I wore to death, and I didn't just wear Fahrenheit, but I had to have everything that went with Fahrenheit. So I had to have the soap, I had to have the deodorant, I had to have the shower gel, I have to have the aftershave balm, even though I don't think I was even shaving then. But,
a total Fahrenheit experience.
Yes, I do still have a few drops of the proper vintage Fahrenheit. I can't wear it much at the moment because Madame Persolaise, the long-suffering Madame Persolaise, there are certain notes that she cannot abide. And the violet leaf note,
violet,
of course, yeah, is so extremely screechingly green. And she can't take green notes in the same way that she really has a very strong aversion to vetiver. There you go. Now yours, that one that you're holding up there, must be of a certain age because it still says Christian Dior rather than just Dior.
This is a first formulation. Absolutely.
No way. Wow.
Love it. Love this stuff.
And still so unique, really.
Oh, incredible. There's nothing quite like it. And it's definitely a trendsetter, a groundbreaking fragrance for sure. And like you said, I'm big fond on my, this is like a library here. So on the far corner there, I have a ton of stuff that's vintage, old school, because I think, you know, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had some of the most incredible fragrances ever made. And it's sad that now it's a lot of cookie cutter. You know, there's a lot of companies just picking up a few things here and there and embellishing some notes, but tweaking things, but it's essentially the same stuff, just regurgitated, which is quite a shame.
I would agree with that to a huge extent. But one thing that I've always thought about that is, I forget who it was, but you know, I must have been watching some talk show or something, and they were interviewing an actor or an actress, and they said, let's say it was an actor, I don't know, and they said to him, has your life changed a lot since you won the Oscar or something, because he just won this award? And he said, well, yes and no. And he said, the thing is that before I got the award, I may have been sent 10 scripts a year, and out of those 10, I may have loved 2 or 3. Now that I've won this award, I'm sent like 400 scripts a year, and out of those 400, I love 2 or 3. And I think we have the same situation now, where the brands are under so much pressure to churn out so much stuff. And yet, in the same way that, like, you know, in the 70s, we may have had 2 or 3 excellent perfumes coming out every year, we still do have 2 or 3 really superb perfumes coming out, but it's harder to find them, because you have to go hunting through all of this stuff that is thrown your way all the time. And that actually, I think, sometimes makes the work that you and I do just a little bit disheartening, because you get this press release that says, I don't know, you know, pink pepper, bergamot, sandalwood, and you think, yeah, so yeah, because we haven't been here before.
So now it's like really finding needles in haystacks, because there's so much coming out, and there's like it's so much more hard work, arduous work to find those incredible scents. Because back then in the 70s and 80s, maybe we had 20, 30 releases per year. Now we have 3,000 releases per year. So absolutely. What would you say if you had to pick maybe like your 3 favorite fragrances of all time, besides Dior Fahrenheit, of course?
No, but Fahrenheit wouldn't be in my top 3 now. Fahrenheit was a first love.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it wouldn't. If I had to go for a top 3, oh, Max. Okay.
Of all time.
Don't overthink this. Don't overthink this. Let us go. It would have to be Guerlain Abbey Rouge. it would have to be Chanel Antaeus. And let's go Tower Perfumes Lone Star Memories.
Oh, nice. I love La du Deserto Marocain. I probably would include that in my top 3. Love that stuff.
That is, I know that is the one that gets the most love from Tower, and obviously, you know, it's wonderful perfume. But my affections have always gone for Lone Star Memories. And I guess the thing that those 3 have in common to varying degrees, you know, Ambi Rouge, Antaeus, and Lone Star, is that they've got a leather thing happening. So I suppose that maybe is a big perfume love for me, together with incense notes. I love incense notes.
Funny you talked about that. I was going to ask you just that. If you had to pick your favorite, maybe 3 or 5 notes that you absolutely love. So incense, leather, now other notes that you absolutely love, like what would they be?
I do get asked this a lot actually by brands and PRs, and my standard answer is to say that what I really like is originality. But if we think notes, definitely incense, definitely leather. I mean, I am partial to a nicely done amber note. I do like greens, because I think greens are still quite unusual, and when by that I suppose I would mean more like the galbanum-y sort of shelled peas, peppers green, rather than grass violetly, although I like that as well. I mean, you know, when Mathilde Laurent did L'Heure Vertueuse for Cartier, you know, the sort of grass lavender one, just extraordinary, amazing. And I love what she did in Herba Fresca for Guerlain. So green, amber, incense, leather. I'm probably going to, rose. I love rose. I absolutely adore rose. Yeah.
Wow. Favorite perfumers, the favorite creators, the favorite noses. If you had to pick 5, let's say your top 5 creators, if you think about all the fragrances you've loved over the years, you know, those guys, those 5 guys or girls, you know, ladies or man or gentlemen that you know that have a great nose because you have a record of loving their creations. It's like top 5 creators.
This is going to be so mean, leaving some people out, but again, I'm trying not to overthink. Okay, if we go back to my book for a sec, I actually, when I was writing it, did a tally of which perfumers came up more often than others. And I think the perfumers that were represented quite strongly were Bertrand Duchaufour, and I would still say that in terms of the people who are working, are we trying to restrict this to people who are currently working, just to make it a bit easier? Because I suppose right up there, the sort of god of all of them, we would have to have Edmond Rudnitska.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like Durissimo and
Eau Sauvage. Yeah. Yep.
But of course, it's well nigh impossible now to try his work in the original form in which he made it. So we kind of put him on a pedestal, but sort of push him to one side and say, okay, right, you're there. But Bertrand Duchaufour, absolutely. I think some of the most gorgeous work that he's done in recent years is for Nila Vermeer Creations. I mean, just stunning pieces of work. Christopher Sheldrake is a name that isn't mentioned very often, maybe because he's like, you know, number 2 or number 3 at Chanel. But of course, Serge Lutens wouldn't be what it is as a brand without Sheldrake's work. So he deserves recognition. I really like how Andy Tower has built up his brand. You know, he is genuinely self-taught, so passionate, so committed. I again may not like some of his pieces of work as much as others, but I'm always excited by anything that he brings out. Mathilde Laurent, you know, currently in-house perfumer at Cartier, previously at Guerlain, is just fascinating and so self-deprecating and unostentatious. So that's 4. Who would a 5th one be? Now, there's always the last ones. It's always the last one on the list that's tricky. Let me think. Okay. Let's say Dominique Ropion, because he's such a master as well, and he made my favorite perfume of the last decade, which was a portrait of a lady for Frederic Malle. So let's say for today, Monsieur Ropion.
Fantastic list. Now, favorite brands. If you had to give us maybe 5 top brands overall, because you've been doing this for over a decade now. So throughout your experience, throughout trials and just tried and true brands that you absolutely came to love most, let's say 80-90% of what they produce, or just because you love maybe 1 or 2 fragrances that they produce, like you love Dior Fahrenheit. what would be like the 5 top brands in your mind of all time?
This is kind of causing me to resolve to be nicer to the people that I interview, because I'm like feeling, oh my God, put on the spot. This is like a job interview. Okay, no. So the brands that, for instance, if I got an email or something saying so-and-so is releasing a new perfume, the brands that I would get really, really excited about are Frederic Malle. I think as a brand, that is absolutely stellar. Again, like you just said, you don't have to like every single thing that the brand releases, but Frederic Malle would be on the list for sure. Always very excited by what Amouage are doing, and particularly interested in what's happening at the moment there, because of course they've had a change of direction as far as creative directorship is concerned, and they have a new creative director, except they're not using that title anymore. I would be lying if I said that I'm not interested in what's happening at Guerlain. Guerlain have a really, really, really tough job, and you will know if you've ever checked out any of the online forums and things like that. There are so many people who complain that Guerlain are no longer making things like L'Heure Bleue and Mitsuko and Shalimar, and you sometimes feel like turning around and saying to them, but they can't, because those are perfumes that are about 100 years old, if not more so, and they have to make perfumes that are relevant to today. And they have a really, really unenviable task of trying to maintain the status and the quality of these classics, but also, generating income from the buyers of today. But Guerlain, I think, are still releasing and producing interesting things today. So we said Frederic Malle, we said Amouage, we said Guerlain. There's so many.
We can keep it a top 3. We can keep it a top 3 if you want.
No, Miele Vermeer I would include in that list, but then that's a brand that is never going to be producing tons of scents. We'll be lucky if we get one every 2 years from them. Serge Lutens are going through,
but that could be a good thing, though.
Totally. I mean, I think over releasing L'Artisan Parfumeur, I've got a fondness for. So yes, I suppose those are the ones that come to mind. But that's not to say that I'm not interested in what Chanel are doing next, or Dior, or I don't know, name some other mainstream brand, or I just this morning I was writing a review of a very interesting new release from Dolce & Gabbana. So it's just whatever comes my way.
Absolutely, I completely agree. There's good and bad releases from every brand, but overall, I like your choices. Very, very great choices. So. Now, talking about reformulations, this is a very sensitive subject. As you mentioned, Guerlain having a hard time, keeping up with, old school fans, because again, they have to sometimes reformulate to cater to new generations. Sometimes it could be a matter of finances, just trying to get, better pricing per mil, whatever the case may be. How do you feel about that? Because that's huge with the fragrance community. As you can imagine, in vlogs and forums, people talk about reformulations. Fragrances have been watered down. Now, companies are offering these big sizes and they don't last. You have to like overspray all the time and spray again and again to be able to get like 8 hours worth of a fragrance. And back in the day, concentration, eau de toilette, 2-3 sprays, it would stay on you for the whole day. So what do you feel about reformulation, and how do you see the future of the industry because of all these reformulations and complaints?
I think I will do my best to try and answer your question, and then you'll probably have to like hit the pause button and say, okay, enough now, because as you know, this is a massive topic, and maybe one day what we should do is like get a whole load of perfume YouTubers and do a sort of conference or something on StreamYard. You can have the job of organizing it, Max. Or maybe that's what we would talk about, at your convention. But I think I would start answering your question by striking potentially a somewhat controversial note, because I think that maybe sometimes people get a little bit too worked up about this and too agitated about this. Because I'm sometimes, maybe not always, but I'm sometimes inclined to think that maybe we are wrong to expect a product to stay exactly the same forever, ad infinitum. And I've often wondered why brands don't actually maybe make a virtue of changing formulations, maybe a little bit like, with a wine. You never ever expect a wine to taste exactly the same from one vintage to the next. And I'm just waiting for the moment where a brand is going to sort of say, well, this is 2010 Fahrenheit, this is 2012 Fahrenheit, batch. Okay, yes. But then that's a whole other minefield as well. And then, of course, I can what are you holding something up there? Because I can't see. I can totally get as well that, the one reason why brands wouldn't want to do that is because as soon as they release a new batch, then there may be no interest in the old batch anymore, and people sort of saying, well, I don't want to buy that bottle because that's old stuff. So I understand. But I think this notion of something being fixed at a particular point in time and never ever changing again is maybe something that we're a little bit mistaken to hold on to, because things do change, and things have always changed. I'm sure brands have tweaked the formula of their perfumes long before we became aware of things like, IFRA and anti-allergen standards, etc., etc., etc. I also worry about blanket proclamations being made by people saying, I know that they have changed this juice. I know that they have reformulated it. I know that they have tweaked it. And then you sometimes feel like saying, okay, but what are you basing your comparison on? Because if you're basing your comparison on a bottle that you bought maybe 15 years ago, then even if you have stored it in the most perfect conditions, even if you have stored it at just above 0 degrees Celsius in the dark in a dry place, then just by virtue of the fact that it's old, the juice will have macerated much, much, much more than something you've just gone and bought in a shop the other day. And some ingredients do age. I think it's Mandy Aftel, the perfumer who works over on the west coast of the USA. She actually makes a point of obtaining some materials that have aged, because she believes they bring a different quality to her work than a fresh batch. So this whole area of comparison is really, really difficult, with people also sometimes making comparisons with perfumes that maybe they haven't stored in the most pristine conditions. And yes, like you said yourself, maybe sometimes brands reformulate because they have to cut costs for whatever reason. But usually they do it because they have to. The amount of work that goes into having to come up with new formula because you've got to meet some new anti-allergen regulations is tremendous. It is a lot of work, and it is a lot of labor hours that could be spent on something else. And brands don't actually really want to do that. Brands don't want to annoy their customers. They want to hang on to customers. So yes, it's sad that Fahrenheit doesn't smell like it used to. We know for a fact that that was not through Dior's fault. Yes, it's sad that Poison doesn't smell as it used to. Yes, it's tragic that Durissimo doesn't smell as it used to. But maybe we also just have to appreciate and understand and accept that those were of their time and of a particular moment in the past, and we just kind of need to move on. It's a different sort of loss. I don't know. I think we get too worked up about it sometimes, personally. Although I also stand by the maxim that if you go into a shop and you love something, buy a backup bottle.
Exactly. I say to that effect at all times. As soon as I hear someone is going to be discontinued or hard to find, I said, if you love the stuff, stock it up, because chances are you're going to be out of it for good. Or when you do find it in the gray market, you're going to pay an arm and a leg because it's discontinued and hard to find. So absolutely. The next subject here, we're nearing the end here, is flankers. What are your thoughts on flankers? Since we talked about reformulations, now, do you think that's another sensitive subject, flankers? Even niche companies are getting into flankers now, as we saw with the recent release from Amouage, Black Iris. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think companies are getting a little lazy, or do you think it's just an easy way to get something that's very successful and just tweak it and release it as a flanker, which designers do all the time? What are your thoughts on that? And why aren't we seeing original releases anymore, like as we should?
Well, I mean, I think you've answered the question perfectly. It's a little bit like you could also go, turn to Hollywood and say, how come we're having so many sequels? I don't have any issue with a flanker in principle, no issue at all. But I do think that if you're going to release something which has got a name tagged onto an earlier existing release, then you at least need to some extent respect the DNA of the original. And I think that was the case with flankers in the past. So, if you had release X and then you had X Noir or X Forte or whatever, you sort of thought, okay, so it's basically going to be the same thing, but it's going to try slightly to create a slightly different effect. That's why you just mentioned Amouage. I think the flanker that they've done actually as a flanker is really good, because I smell it and I think, oh yeah, this is Interlude Man, except they've gone and done a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but I can still completely and utterly recognize this as Interlude Man. There were a few times in the past where I think brands have veered away from that a little bit. Like I remember that Dior did a beautiful, beautiful flanker to Poison called Tender Poison. But I suppose what they did was they retained the DNA of the concept, because then we also had Hypnotic Poison and Midnight Poison, although that was also starting to get into the times when, it was flanker heavy. I mean, look at Calvin Klein. We were talking about First Loves. I also wore Calvin Klein Eternity to death. I have completely lost track of how many flankers there are of things like Eternity and Obsession and CK1. So yes, I think it absolutely has to be taken as indicative of a certain amount of shortcut taking from brands and thinking, oh, okay, here's this name, we can build on this. But we could also have a whole other conversation about brands creating new perfumes, but giving them the names of pre-existing successful perfumes, like, Dior and Joy. I actually think that Joy is by no means terrible as a perfume, but it's kind of interesting that Dior could not come up with any other name other than Joy. So yes, I think all of this is evidence of the fact that a lot of perfume industry decisions are led by marketing rather than by creativity.
I agree 100%. It's almost like, I understand the novelty of it. They need to keep, the wheels going. They need to make sales. They need to have these, new releases, summer flankers, winter flankers, just to get, revenue. But I would love to see companies actually exercising at least one original release every couple of years, something really groundbreaking or different, which is very lacking, especially in the designer world. Not so much in the niche or indie. We see a lot of that, people trying different things and unique, but in the designer, it's really lacking at this time over the past at least 10 years, I would say. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would completely agree. And again, I think part of the reason for that is because there is just so much pressure. So if you think about the big brands, the big mainstream brands and the pillars, we're supposed to call them, aren't we? The pillars that they've released in recent years. So Chanel, obviously, a couple of years ago, came out with Gabrielle. And there's never anything wrong with these fragrances. I mean, obviously, they're produced by big brands. They're made by massively talented and skilled perfumers. In the case of Gabrielle, it's Olivier Polge. In the case of Joy, it's François Demachy. These are people who know what they're doing. They would not be able to create a bad perfume probably if they tried. But I think because one group gets in on the mix and says, well, we can't have that because it's going to be too inaccessible to this sector of the market. And then another group comes in and says, no, well, you need to take this interesting thing out because that's just way too weird and we can't put that into shops. Ideas just get like watered down and watered down and watered down. And I think you can feel when you smell Gabrielle that there was something interesting at its core, but I don't think you could call it necessarily a distinctive perfume in the same way that if somebody were to walk down the street wearing Coco or number 5 or number 19, you would immediately know what they're wearing. And again, that comes down to, I think, the bottom line. I think the brand that actually put out the most commendable release in recent-ish years is Guerlain with Petite Robe Noire, because that was an original idea. I mean, okay, that has also now been flankered to death. In fact, this year we'll get some version of Petite Robe Noire as well, but it worked, and it has been a success for them, as certainly in Europe, and I think rightly so.
One more question, then we'll drop this, company and structure of the fragrance world, because I know it's sensitive at times. But how do you feel about fragrances being bought out by big, corporations like Estee Lauder? Frederic Malle was recently bought a few years ago. Like, all these niche companies are being bought out and restructured. Do you feel like this is a way to kind of water down those ideas that were originally very unique and exotic, and then because you have so many hands on a pot, all of a sudden these great brands become a little bit watered down as well? What do you feel about those big conglomerates bought outs?
I don't know actually if it is a thing of watering them down. I think a lot depends on who's doing the buying. I mean, I guess it was inevitable, because you've got these big companies checking out the market and going, oh, look, these guys are actually being really successful. There's this little brand called Frederic Malle. There's a brand called Le Labo. There's a brand called Kilian. They seem to be doing pretty well. Let's go and get in on that action. Partly that was led by the fact that growth in mainstream perfume sales was not that strong. And so they thought, okay, well, let's see where we could try and find some areas for growth. And that's why they did all of these acquisitions. Now, Lauder have actually got a very, very good track record of nurturing brands. I also am impressed by the way in which they allow all of their brands to have very, very distinct and very strong identities of their own. I mean, all you'd need to do is just search online for companies owned by Estee Lauder, and people may actually be surprised by some of the companies that come under the Estee Lauder group, because, as I say, that they are very much permitted to have their own identities. And I mean, I can speak for London. When you go to the Lauder offices in London, each brand totally has its own area, which is very much encouraged to have its own look and its own feel and its own aesthetic, its own vibe. And they encourage that. They want the public to see these as separate brands. There may, be people out there who don't know that Tom Ford Beauty, Tom Ford Perfumes is an Estee Lauder brand. It was actually created by Lauder. And yet there is nothing about it, I don't think, that screams Lauder, when you go into a shop. So I hope and I trust, and I'm fairly confident that Frederic Malle is in safe hands, at least partly because Frederic Malle himself is very much still involved. But some of the other brands that do the acquiring maybe don't have such wonderful reputations. And, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, I don't know, but you'll probably be aware that Thierry Mugler recently changed hands. And I'm not going to say who I think they went to, because I don't want to get it wrong. Because do you know for a fact who they went to? See, I want to say L'Oreal, but I don't want to get it wrong. So
I think you're right, L'Oreal.
Okay, so
yeah.
I mean, and L'Oreal currently own YSL. And, you could sort of think, well, maybe things at YSL aren't quite so wonderful as they were 10, 15 years ago. And I think a lot of people are waiting with bated breath to see what happens with Mugler. But L'Oreal are doing wonderful things with Armani Privé. So it probably depends on, who the creative force is and what influence they have. Penhaligon's and L'Artisan Parfumeur were a little while ago acquired by Puig. And certainly L'Artisan are still doing interesting things, and Penhaligon's do still release in any given year. I would say they do at least one or two interesting things. For me, Penhaligon's for the longest time is a brand that has struggled with its identity, and I think it continues to some extent to struggle with its identity. But L'Artisan is still very, very strong in Puig, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a recipe for disaster, this acquisition business. What is worrying is that it does not really leave much of a possibility for similar brands to take their place on the market. So you now either have the big boys and the big girls and all of the companies that they own, and then you also have the really, really small players. So, for example, in that, I would name Neela Vermeer, even though, Neela Vermeer herself knows how much I respect her work. But, I think she would be the first to admit that she's not Frederic Malle, she's not Guerlain, she's not Dior. You've got the people now who are on the one side, the pretty small players, and the huge players on the other side, and this massive gap in the middle. And I think that's what the acquisitions have caused. They've caused this real difficulty in some of the smaller players to be able to move into that middle ground, because that middle ground has become pretty much inaccessible.
I agree. So we're going to start now with what it's called a rapid fire, which is a series of quick questions, which is just a way for us listeners out there in fragrance world to get to know Darius a little bit more. So describe Darius in 3 words, actually 3 words that would describe your personality or who you are.
I know exactly what word my wife would be saying. I'll say she would say moody. She would say moody.
Oh, I get that too. All right. Favorite color?
Black.
Favorite place?
Oh, a town called Antibes in the south of France, west of Nice.
A music choice?
Do you mean like
genre, like your favorite music genre?
Oh, yeah, pop music, probably. Yeah.
Favorite dish or favorite food?
See, as a kid, as a teenager, I would always have said lasagna because I really loved my mum's lasagna. But I'm really, really partial to Indian food. I love something called a samosa chaat, which is like sort of a samosa served with like toppings as a kind of starter or as a side dish. So yeah, we'll go with that.
Nice. A drink of choice?
Cardamom tea.
Very nice. A hobby besides fragrance? You have any other hobbies that you enjoy?
Movies are a huge passion. I actually studied journalism at film at university. That's like a real film geek.
One turn off / pet peeve that you have?
People not being punctual.
If you weren't a writer or a journalist, what do you think you would be, profession-wise?
I think I've sometimes thought it would have been interesting to be a lawyer.
Oh, wow. I can see that. If you could have one superpower, what would you choose for that power to be?
Invisibility.
Wow. So one last question. If you were an animal, what would that animal be? Why? If you could choose one animal if you could be an animal, what would that animal be? Or maybe if you see yourself, your characteristics, your personality closer to that one animal, what would that animal be?
Gosh. What's a sort of like particularly meticulous animal that like everything has to be done just so and nothing out of place? And I don't know, is there an animal like that?
Like a bird, maybe?
Yeah, building a nest or something like that. I mean, no, come on. See, I'm doing it now. I'm overthinking it. I should just go, because the first thing that came into my mind was dog, because I like dogs. I don't have a dog, but would I see myself? I'm probably more feline in my personality, actually. So maybe some kind of.
I can relate to that because I love dogs, but a lot of people say that I have more of a cat personality, so I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah, let's go with some kind of panther type creature.
Big cat, I like that.
Yeah.
So in closing, I'd like for you to tell the folks that are listening to us and seeing us here in Fragrance Land, if you have any, parting gifts or anything you want to say about what's going on in your life, or if you have anything you want to share that we haven't touched upon, feel free to say anything you want and just say goodbye to everyone that joined us here today and hanged out with us.
Well, the one thing I would have to say absolutely is thank you very much, Max, for having me on board here. It's really, really wonderful. I try and keep up with as many of your videos as possible myself. You know, you do way, way, way more than I do, so sometimes it's a little bit hard keeping up, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think what I would also say is to extend the thank you to all of the people who watch me on my channel. I think maybe some people consider it to be a little bit of a cliche, or maybe just empty words when I say that I really, really enjoy the interaction with them, which obviously I can have because it's live. But I mean it. I am so lucky that the audience I seem to have attracted is so knowledgeable and passionate, and friendly and approachable, and not in the least bit entitled. And I learn so much from them as well. And I always come away from those 45 or 50-minute videos, you know, having connected with people all the way from like San Diego to Sydney, Australia. I always feel like I've just, you know, been in this huddle with a group of people who share the same interest, and it's wonderful, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And it's amazing that I'm able to, you know, that the technology allows us to do it.
Absolutely. Enjoy his channel. I'm going to have it linked in the description, guys. If you haven't checked out his channel, definitely worth checking out. Extremely well-versed, a lot of great information. He talks about a lot of great new releases. It's like a live blog and very interactive with people from all over the world. I've been a part of some of those lives, and I truly, you know, recommend you guys check it out. If you're a true fragrance lover out there, definitely somebody to consider watching on a regular basis. So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for your kind, you know, time here with us, for hanging out with us here today in this little Max chat. Stay tuned for a lot more. And as always, remember to wear what truly moves you, be kind to each other, and let's unite, because we need unity in this world. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you guys again real soon. Take care.